Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ask an Architect. I'm Julia Andor, your National Vice President. I'm here speaking with Caitlin Brady.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caitlin, for joining us. Um, maybe while we're getting started, you could tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of why you got into the field of architecture.
Sure. So my name is Caitlin Brady. Right now, I'm an architect at Ayers Saint Gross, based in DC. But I started in Philadelphia. That's where I grew up, right outside of the city. And when it came time to picking what I wanted to do for college, pursuing majors, I kind of had a whole life of experience of architect adjacent activities that kind of led me into this profession. When I had dolls, I was building houses for them rather than changing their clothes or playing with their hair. I grew up in a cul-de-sac. We did a lot of master planning with chalk where we would ride our bikes and we would design buildings and homes. I loved Legos, but never had any of the sets. I had a lot of the hand-me-down Legos, so it was just random assortments where I would build my own things because it was little bits and pieces of many different other things. Lots of blocks, Lincoln logs, the whole thing. So my whole life, I've kind of been a builder, a creative thinker, and that led me to architecture. So I applied to 7 schools and was accepted to 7 schools when I was figuring out colleges. I knew I wanted to go to a bachelor program rather than doing a different bachelor's and then getting my master's. That just seemed like a better path for what I was looking for at the time. And I ended up at Drexel, which Drexel has a really great 2+4 program where I went to school full time for 2 years and then took night classes and worked full time for the remaining 4 years. So I was able to graduate with all of my work experience and sit for my licensing exams and become a registered architect in Pennsylvania. So also, Drexel was very affordable and I had scholarships there too. So that's something if someone is considering being an architect, consider what type of salary you would make after school and what type of student loans you want to take on. And kind of that's a big consideration. I don't think high school, at least my high school self, I was not thinking about, but I'm very thankful that I considered it now. So when I was at Drexel, I guess I'll talk a bit about AIAS because we're on this episode. So you're in studio, you're very heads down, focused on projects, and I think someone had come by and bribed us with pizza to come to this meeting. An upperclassman like, it'll be worth it. You should come. Put down your drafting tools for a minute. And I ended up getting really involved, and AIAS was really pivotal in introducing me to upperclassmen, other people in the program. I eventually got my first job through a connection in AIAS and also got to know a lot of the firms in Philadelphia because we were cold calling them to raise money for some of our events. So we literally would call 50 firms at lunch one day, and then we would call the next 50 firms the next day at lunch and really got to know a lot of people in the city that way. I helped plan one of our first Beaux-Arts ball in a really long time. And was just really, I really loved, AIAS was a great transition into what I'm doing now at the AIA on like a larger scale as well. So I worked in Philadelphia for a number of years, big firms, small firms. I moved to San Francisco. I lived there for about 4 years. And I worked at a firm specializing in commercial projects. And then now I'm in DC working in higher education. So that's kind of a quick summary, and we can dive into anything else if you have questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe the first question that I have for you, it seems like you're really interested in community building and in mentorship. What do you think is kind of the most important quality that an architect should have?
I think architects, it's really important for us to be collaborative, to have great communication skills, and then also really great listening skills too. Because we are building projects for other people, many of us don't have the luxury of being independently wealthy where we're building for our own, in our own backyards, doing our own projects. We're working for other people. And we have to keep in mind not just bringing what we want, what we think is best, but really talking to the community, talking to the stakeholders, talking to the owner, to the users, and understanding what would make that project the best for that community and that user population. then taking our creative thinking and our creative problem solving and applying that, and then providing a great solution for whoever's using it. Because if we build something that is leaky, it doesn't work, doesn't serve their purposes, then we're not really doing our job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great approach to life, not even just architecture. So how does that kind of tie into maybe your involvement with the AIA? I know, like I mentioned, you're really interested in mentorship. I am too, so I'm kind of selfishly asking, but I'm just curious how those kind of things play into community building, social interaction, and all that fun stuff as well.
Yes, I'm really passionate about mentorship. I don't think that I would be where I am today without some really great people taking me under their wing, showing me what it is to be, a top performer in the field, to just kind of strive for more than just, the average Joe in the profession. And so I'm very thankful to those people, both men and women, who have guided me along the way and have fielded my emails and have gotten lunch with me or grabbed coffee. And I want to be that person as well for others. So I have a podcast for women in architecture because I was having these conversations with women and I saw a lot of trends popping up of issues they faced and times in their life where maybe they felt like they weren't, welcome in the profession, or they didn't know where to go, or they needed more flexibility to be able to stay in the profession, or especially around child rearing ages. So I decided to kind of record these conversations, have them with more people, and then also put them on the podcast, because not everyone has someone at their firm. I've worked at some firms where I really don't feel like I connect with anyone. So on a day-to-day basis, I am learning and I'm talking to people and enjoying that interaction, but I feel like no one is really like my buddy that has taken me under their wing. And so it's helpful if you can find a job where you have that person, but not everyone has that luxury of being able to keep looking for that job until you find someone that clicks with you. So the podcast is kind of a way that if someone were looking to learn from a leading woman in architecture, or even, I think it's important too to kind of create this web of information where not only women in architecture we're learning from, but the women that we could potentially work with out in the field, the contractors, the engineers, the planners, people in business, people in PR, those women too. I think it's really helpful to learn from their perspectives because it makes you a better architect. And so you had also mentioned the AIA too. I'm trying to remember the questions as I go. The AIA is a great way to find people that you click with. And I think it helps you be a better architect, but it also helps you form connections, and you can find that mentorship there. You also learn a ton. And there's a lot of different areas with it. I just got back from the AIA Women's Leadership Summit, so I'm like brimming with inspiration. But if that's not your thing, maybe there's like an environmental group that you can join, or a small business group, or a large firm business group, or healthcare or interior design. So you can find your niche within the AIA and connect with people who are like-minded and also want to push for the same change and improvements that you're interested in.
Yeah, that's great. And where can our listeners or viewers find your podcast or stay connected with you?
Yeah, you can find it, I guess, wherever you listen to podcasts. So it's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon as well. It's called Architectette. So that's just architect with ETTE at the end. And that's also our website, architectette.com. You can also follow on LinkedIn. There's like a group on LinkedIn that you can follow, a page where we post things. And then also on Instagram. We do have a TikTok, but it's not updated as much as I would like it to be. So maybe just focus on LinkedIn and Instagram for now.
Yeah, perfect. I definitely recommend everybody check those out, and I'll be continuing to do so as well. Kind of in that same vein, do you have any advice for students that may be listening or watching, or kind of emerging professionals that may be listening or watching that you'd like to share?
Sure. I think sometimes in architecture school, we have this vision of what an architect is. And if you don't feel like you fit that vision, I would just urge students not to feel discouraged. We need many different architects doing many different things in many different communities. And because you're not that, dude that we study in the textbooks with the glasses and like the cape on, it doesn't mean that you're not a bad architect. And I think sometimes maybe you're not like, maybe you don't mesh with the professor, or you're not the favorite of the professor, and your work isn't highly celebrated and you're not winning the awards and all of that. Don't feel discouraged, because you're still learning that creative problem solving. And we still need people to do many different types of designs. We need people doing, embassies. We need people doing Dunkin' Donuts and working for developers or working for real estate agents, or maybe your skills, you're going to architecture school, but your skills kind of lie more in like the people side of things. There's a whole series of people who are leading firms and they're doing all of the business development and they're doing the marketing. So maybe you could end up there. I just think that don't get discouraged. Definitely have some self-reflection and understand where your strengths and your interests are, and then try to find how you can connect that into architecture. And I think too, if you have other interests outside of architecture, even better, because you can plug that in. There's a lot of people that are really interested in music, and maybe they have a band on the weekend and then they're designing music venues. Or I have all sorts of random interests where I play volleyball and I do some improv, and that kind of all filters into who I am as an architect. And maybe I'm not literally designing those facilities, but those added interests make me understand and relate to people and my clients a lot better. So definitely leverage those outside interests and activities too. And don't forget about them. Come out of studio every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some fantastic advice. And something that everyone should kind of take into account as like coming how they are and celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
And also making time outside of the studio. I think there are some good tidbits in that answer.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned engaging with local communities and making sure that we're kind of listening to the people that we're working for. What's a good way for architects to engage with communities, or in your experience, what are some approaches that have worked for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of different ways. You can start by volunteering. So yeah.
All right. So what's a good way for architects to engage with their local communities and ensure kind of that their designs are aligning with the people using the spaces, and maybe what's worked for you in your practice?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you can definitely start with just volunteering. So you could do a Habitat for Humanity, or maybe there's some type of other local thing that you can get involved in that's just for your community. I have gone the route of getting involved with ACE mentors. That's a really great way to connect with high schoolers who are interested in architecture, construction, engineering. I also learned a ton from all of the other volunteers too. It's so exciting to see an engineer give their feedback and give a presentation, or developers talk to the students and interact. So it's learning goes many different directions in that setting. So ACE mentors, I think, is really great. If you are, maybe you're working in a firm, if you have projects that are community based, maybe you are meeting with the community already. Or if you're not, maybe you can encourage your project manager to set up something where maybe you do a workshop, or there's a listening session or something where you're getting feedback from the community. And so I think those are ways where, when we're working, we should definitely be engaging with the community, but also if in your own time too, if you want to get to know communities, you can also join a local, I'm trying to think of what it would be called, like go to your zoning meetings or your planning meetings, or join a neighborhood association and just see what's happening and going there. When I moved to DC, I joined my neighborhood's community meeting, and they weren't talking about any projects yet, but there's a lot of crime in the area, and car accidents and all sorts of stuff. And it really made me think like, oh wow, like what type of like urban planning things have I learned from going to like workshops with like the Gale Institute and things like that. But I was like, oh, maybe there's some like traffic calming measures that we could introduce, or the signage is off, or maybe we do, we learn about like these wool nerfs and stuff in school, where we're, paving the whole street with sidewalk materials, and just different ideas like that, where I haven't spoken up on any of that, but just attending those meetings, maybe there are problems that the community is having where us architects, we have all these ideas rattling around from our studies. We can apply those and benefit our community.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point about kind of getting involved where you are and also branching out and how you can do that personally and professionally. I think that's all really great information for the people listening and watching. So how do you think, kind of in that same vein, architects can design public spaces that promote more inclusivity, safety, accessibility? These are all really things that our members are specifically interested. I know students are interested, but also in the profession, people are interested in. So I'm curious what your take is.
Yeah, that's a big question. So for public spaces, interior, exterior, I think very different strategies for both of those. I think oftentimes we are not the ones with the money funding these projects, but we are brought on as a consultant and as an expert. And to make them more inclusive and equitable, we really need to bring what we've learned in school and what we've learned professionally and advocate for those things of, yes, maybe the sustainable materials are a little bit more expensive, but it's beneficial to have a less toxic interior environment. Or, oh, you're not considering LEED, like why not? Maybe, it's not that expensive to do it, or maybe we could work it into the budget, or maybe we can design 2 LEED standards or well standards, but they're not going for that accreditation, which I think like the fees there sometimes dissuade clients from pursuing that. Also, in terms of equity in spaces, it's who is using this space. We had an episode on the podcast recently where we were talking about the built environment and just larger bodied people in spaces. Are there places for people of all abilities and needs to sit? Is it just one tiny chair throughout the whole space? Or is it a variety of seats where maybe it's bench seating or seats with arms or high tables, low tables? So people with different, maybe you need an arm to get up out of a chair, or maybe all the seats are too low, you can't sit. So considering that many different people will be using a public space, and how will they use that, and will they be able to use that too?
So you mentioned kind of advocating for things that are important to you or to the world or to the community, even if the client may not necessarily be on board at first. Do you have any tips maybe for having those hard discussions, or even kind of young professionals advocating for themselves in their roles, or advocating for things that are important to them?
Yeah, I think if you're starting out in your career, it's really important to leverage what used to be called the IDP, what is now the AXP hours. So if you're at a firm and you feel like you're not getting specific type of experience, or you want to get experience in a different category or bucket, definitely use those hours as kind of like hey, you want me to be licensed someday, don't you? And you're interested in advancing my expertise and my skills. Like, I actually need hours in this area, and I've only been working in this other area. And that's a great way to kind of start that conversation. But if you don't have that, maybe just building up the confidence of, hey, I'm interested in working in XYZ. Having the confidence to talk to your manager about that is really important. And also understanding too that you're not going to, it is a business. You're working for a business and they need you in certain areas. And so it probably won't happen tomorrow. You're not going to get that switch immediately. But if you work for someone who's like a really great manager, then they will try to work to transition you into that area that you're interested in, or that you want to have more experience in. And if you're working for a firm and they're not interested in that, and they're not receptive to hearing that, maybe consider what your options are there. They might not have the capacity to have someone move around and get different experience. And that's not because they're bad or not interested in advancing your career, but maybe they're just a little bit pinched in terms of resources. And consider what your future might be there. Maybe you might have to switch firms to get that other experience, or to get experience in a project type that the firm that you're currently working for doesn't have. And don't be afraid to do that. And when you switch, make sure you are negotiating your salary, and that you're getting a wage where you can live in the city. So when I moved from Philadelphia to San Francisco, it was kind of a whirlwind. I did a lot of prep in terms of what firms I was going to apply for and where I was going to apply and what type of work I wanted to do. But once I got the interviews, I did some research in terms of, I talked to some other people in San Francisco and saw what they were paying their employees for someone that would be kind of at my experience level. So I got that information. I checked the AIA salary calculator, and then also knew kind of what the range would be. But then I also looked at a few apartments of, okay, I know I'm going to have roommates. This is San Francisco, but what areas where do I want to live in the city? What would those finances be? And then I made sure that whatever salary I was accepting, it was going to enable me to have a little bit of savings and, kind of pay my bills and make sure that I was living comfortably and I wasn't eating ramen all the time. So when you do that, make sure you consider that, do that research, and Don't just take the star job for like, $1 a day because you want that on your resume. Ultimately, it's helpful to build a life and have some savings and pay off debts and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic advice. And how does that kind of apply maybe externally? Maybe you're in a firm, and maybe other than advocating for yourself and your professional development, you don't really see that they're interested in working on issues like inclusivity or safety or diversity. Is there, in projects that are more community focused, is there any kind of tips you have about advocating for things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually just attended a workshop on this where they were saying no matter how much heart you put into an idea you have or a proposal at your company of how to make it better, or, this, we could do this and it would be, we'd have more diversity or more engagement, or we can go after these types of projects because your heart is in it. You have to make a business case to the company of why is having more diversity in the firm going to benefit us, not just financially, but also in terms of, the perspectives and our richer contributions to ideas and output at the firm. So if you have something you're really passionate about, like I started with a few other women, the Women's Affinity Group at my company. And I think we probably could have been a little bit better in terms of proving its financial viability, but we had a lot of support from the company. It's a women-led company, and we thought, we want a space for women to connect and have more kind of networking and just airing of things we want to work on and things we're proud of and what we're doing at the firm. And so we were able to put this together. We haven't had any, it's not like a huge financial contribution from the firm to start this group. And we're really trying to make sure that we're not using up a lot of people's extra time. It's really just as efficient and quick connection and networking, communication, and community that we can form. But if you have something that is going to take up a lot of time or resources or finances, definitely build the case to your employer of why this is important, what is the financial or the business impacts of it, and why would it be beneficial for the firm to invest in that? And then be the champion. If you can't just say we should do this and then delegate it to someone else to carry it out. You really have to carry that through then. It's okay, this is the plan. Thank you for supporting me. This is how we're going to do it. Find people who are interested in the same things and pull them together. And then next thing you know, you have a movement.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think some of our listeners and watchers will be putting that into practice sometime soon. So do you have any books that you're reading right now, or things about maybe an interesting topic that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I was just going to pull it up because I lost what it was. So there's a book called Invisible Women. I think it's called Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World for Men. And that was a book I listened to on audiobook this summer. It's just really inspiring. There's a lot of ways that the world that we live in right now is based on kind of the average man, the average size, build, etc. And our world is a lot more diverse than that. And sometimes it's a disservice to people of other sizes and genders and abilities because of this kind of stereotype. So it talks about everything from bias in the medical field in terms of medical research, drug research, crash test dummies, the built environment in terms of that's why we're all freezing in the summer because the air conditioning is way up. So all the women in the office have, sweaters on and space heaters. So it was a really inspiring, eye-opening book of the things in our world that are kind of just designed for someone else. And here we are just existing in this world. So I recommend reading that book.
Yeah, it kind of goes to show that the built environment goes a little bit further than just the buildings that we're in. It's kind of the way that we experience things and kind of who it's built for and what it's built for. So we've been closing all of our interviews with the question, what is your hottest take on architecture?
Okay, yes, I saw this and I'm almost afraid to say this because I know people are really going to have a lot of backlash. I work in mostly commercial architecture, so people will be safe by me saying this because it's a residential architectural preference. But I prefer carpet in bedrooms. I think it's cozier. I don't always love the aesthetic, but like I love just, I don't want any wood floor. I just love like a nice, comfy plush carpet.
I
So
love that. Your feet are never cold.
I know, and it's cozier, especially, you're probably barefoot a lot in the bedroom, and I live in places where it gets cold in the winter, so to have that nice plush carpet is nice. Aesthetically, maybe not, but in terms of function, I like that.
Yeah, that's great. And I do kind of in closing just want to ask maybe if you have any projects that you want to tell us about or anything that you're interested in. I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to just speak about kind of what you've been working on or what you're passionate about. So yeah, just the floor is yours.
Yeah, in terms of projects, I just worked on Ayers Saint Gross's, we partnered with Robert Amstern to design the Catholic University School of Nursing. So that is nearing construction completion. So everyone should check it out. It's a beautiful project, kind of in that collegiate Gothic style. Although it's brand new, we used a lot of modern technologies. It has that kind of old feel to it, which is really interesting. So I'm excited for that to be built and to walk through it. And that'll happen, I think, at the end of 2023. And then in terms of my projects, I'm excited. Architect.net has a lot of great episodes. At the time of speaking, we have 18 or so episodes. New episodes come out every other week through the end of the year. And then I've already recorded a bunch of episodes for 2024. So there's so many women I want to talk to. It's like I can't edit quick enough to get all of them out. So if you're interested in learning about women in architecture, engineering, construction, landscape architecture, planning, lab planning, all sorts of industries related to architecture, check out that podcast. There's a lot to learn from that. And if you're interested in connecting, again, like I said, you can follow on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer questions. And I've applied to a lot of different firms. I've worked in 3 different cities in the US. I spent a year traveling remotely and doing like the digital nomad thing during the pandemic. So I have a lot of different experience in architecture, and I'm happy to share that if you have any questions. Definitely feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for your time and for chatting with me for a little while. I'm so happy to hear all of your responses and kind of learn a little bit myself as an emerging professional. So
yeah, Julia, it was so nice to meet you, and hopefully we had some tech issues, so hopefully it all comes together, and it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.